figures out that I know a particular joke, right, or some reference. And, when I make some joke, he kind of looks at me and goes, oh, you get that joke? You've seen that movie? You've seen that video? And it's like they don't know who I am. They don't know very much about me. And every once in a while, as my kids get older, I make a joke with them, and they kind of look at me like, oh, how did you know that? You know about these things? Like, they don't know, all the crap I know, right? So, ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm revealing to them a little bit about myself. And this is what God does with us, right? And he reveals to the pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So God reveals himself to those who are pure in heart, those who can handle it. And the more pure we are, the more God shows us of himself, okay? And the church is like this, right? So, why is there a Trinity? I don't know, right? This is just what Christ said. This is what he said. He's talked to the Father. Then we have the Epiphany. And then he says, baptize in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. If I was making up a religion, I would not have made up a Trinity. That just complicates things and creates a lot of religious war, right? It's not something that you should do if you're making a religion up. But we didn't get to choose it, right? It was revealed to us. And this is the way all the church is, right? Many of the things of the church, well, why should we do that? I don't know, is my answer usually. This is what was revealed to us. This is what was taught to us. And, I'm an ant, and I don't understand the nuclear physics, right? And as soon as I say I'm going to, most likely I've got a problem, right? Once you're like, okay, wait, the nuclear physics really isn't happening unless I get it, And once you've put yourself in that position, we're back to I'm God. So what's the definition of grace? The first is the salvation of mankind. So this is sort of the general definition of the word grace. So some people say the grace of God. What is that? Ephesians says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and not that of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. And this is very important. And this is something that confuses the Protestant church often about the Orthodox and the Catholic. And sometimes it confuses us, right? I have to earn salvation. How do I earn salvation? I got to go take communion. I got to go to confession. I got to read the Bible. I got to do the sacraments, right? And the sacraments are one of these things I got to do. If I do the thing, then I get to go to heaven, right? So what have I done? I've earned heaven. And the Bible and St. Paul and the church are very clear. We don't earn anything, right? And it's very clear here. Not that of yourselves, it is the gift of God. Salvation is a gift. It's not something you can earn. Right? It's not something you work for by chalking up, I'm going to fast the whole Lent this time, or I'm going to go to confession twice a month, or whatever the case may be. So that's sort of the first definition of grace, sort of this overarching salvation of mankind. But the second definition of grace, and the one that's more pertinent to sacraments, it's God's power and strength. So whenever someone says, God's grace be with you, what's he saying? God's power and God's strength. Okay? And in the scriptures, it's used to sort of to describe God's work on earth. Right? Now again, why does all this happen? I don't know. When Christ came, this is what he established. This was the system he created. This was the system the apostles took from Christ and continued on. Right? And we can get into arguments about, should it be this way or should it be that way? It's really not my place, right? At some level, this is the system we received. Now, I could tell you if it makes sense to Mark, but I don't think you should care if it makes sense to Mark, right? So what is St. Paul saying in Corinthians? And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. So grace and strength are the same. Next. Therefore, most gladly, I would rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Now again, in this verse, it captures the whole essence of sacraments. Where is St. Paul putting himself? He says, my grace is sufficient for you, my strength is made perfect in what? Weakness, right? So the recipient of grace has to be a recipient in weakness, in poverty, right? We have to come to the church like beggars, like sick people. That's how we come to church. Right? And if we don't see ourselves as beggars and as sick people, then we're probably not going to get much out of church, right? Because St. Paul very clearly says, my grace is made perfect in weakness. That's where grace abounds, right? So the sacraments are a fountain of this grace, and we'll talk about what the sacraments are here in a second. And the fountain only goes to those who are thirsty, right? If you walk up to a fountain, no matter how nice of a fountain, and you say, not thirsty, don't need it, all right? Don't drink, right? There's nothing for you to drink here. But if you go, you throw your face on it, like someone who's been in the desert for 3 days, that's where the sacraments are, right? They're perfected in weakness. And he says, I would rather boast in my infirmities that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Okay, so I'll continue. Let me go to the next quote. Take, for example, Niagara Falls. There's so much potential power in falling water, but watching it is of no use. One must channel the strength to produce electrical power. In this case, the sacraments are 7 or more power lines from God's Niagara Fall to us, right? So again, this is the channel of God's grace, God's power, God's strength to us. And so I saw this nice thing on one of these Orthodox websites. It was nice. A man asked a priest, if God is everywhere, why do I need to go to church? Which is a question many youth ask, right? God's everywhere, why do I need to go to church? And the priest had a very nice response. He said, water is everywhere in the atmosphere, right? Everywhere you breathe, there's water, right? But if you want to drink, you have to go to a fountain, right? Where the water is channeled and focused and flowing, right? And this is the same way the church is with us, right? God is everywhere, yes. Prayer is everywhere, yes. But God's grace gets channeled through these sacraments. Now, why did God choose to do that? I can give you some answers, but my primary answer is I don't know, right? But this is the way Christ implemented the church, right? He just did. Okay. So what's a mystery? And I'll talk about mystery here in a second, but mystery is, we often say sacraments, and I don't want to be nitpicky, but a mystery is a much better word than sacrament, right? So in the Eastern Orthodox churches, they always say the mysteries. They don't say the sacraments. Sacraments is actually a Catholic word. It comes from a Latin background. And in Arabic, it's asrar, right? It's actually mysteries in Arabic, which is a much better translation than sacraments. We've sort of adopted sacraments. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if we can start calling them mysteries, that would even be better, because that's really what they are, right? The sacrament literally means to make something holy. A mystery means I have no idea, right? And this is normally the answer of the Orthodox Church to most things religious, right? When does the body and blood, change from bread and wine? I don't know. How? I don't know. Why? I don't know, right? And this is what God has laid out for us. So we have material things like bread, oil, wine, and they give us an invisible grace. So this is the definition of a mystery of a sacrament. Visible sign, whether it be bread, oil, wine, whatever the case may be, and gives an invisible grace. Okay? I see you like that. It is important to note that the material items are not evil in and of themselves. This is very important, right? There are several heresies and several people I've met who think that material things are evil. Money's evil, sex is evil, alcohol is evil, people are evil, right? And none of these things are true, right? God came and everything God made, he made good. And that's the church's view on these things. Money is not evil, alcohol is not evil. These things are not evil, right? They can be used clearly for an evil purpose. They can be used in an evil way. But the material things are never considered evil. There were some heresies in the early centuries that said material things were actually bad. Okay? And the church, almost to counteract this, said, no, we're going to take those material things and we're going to use them and make them holy, right? So we take things like bread and wine and oil, things of the earth, and we consecrate them. And God says, I'm not going to give you the grace just invisibly from the sky. I'm going to give it to you through the earth that I created, right? I want you to know that the earth I created is good. And in fact, I'm going to give you my grace through those things, the things you know, bread, wine, oil, whatever the case may be. So nothing is evil in the Orthodox Church. We don't believe people are ever evil. We don't believe material things are evil. We believe that I can be fooled. Satan can use them against me. I can be tricked. I can love money more than God. Doesn't make money evil. Okay, I said that. All right, so what do we need in a sacrament, in a mystery? A divine institution, a visible sign, and the hidden power of God. So these are sort of the formula of what a mystery is. If you look up the dogmatic theology textbooks, this is kind of the textbook definition of a mystery. Oh, that's small. This relying of God's power was shown to us in the New Testament when God spit on the earth and made clay of the spittle. He took a visible sign and anointed the blind man's eyes. The man received God's invisible grace through a visible sign. So you see what's going on here, right? Christ did this. Like someone shows up to him and is blind, he could have put his hand on him and said, "You're healed." But every once in a while, he would do something like this, where he'd say, "You know what, I'm going to heal you a little differently. I'm going to spit on the ground, I'm going to make some clay, and I'm going to put it on your eyes. And the clay is going to heal your eyes." Right? Now, what was Christ doing? He was laying the foundation that something material can give an invisible grace. Right? And so every once in a while, Pope Kyrillos, when he did some of his miracles, would do things like this, right? Sometimes he'd lay his hands, but sometimes he'd use something material, and the material thing would do the miracle. So sacraments are many things. They're an epiphany. They're a manifestation of who God is. It's showing us what these things are. And it's an intimate, personal contact relationship with God. Right? So the sacraments are where we meet God. And it's very important that we understand this. Right? So Holy Communion, again, is one of the most intimate mysteries of the Church. And we can never allow ourselves to get into a routine. It is meeting Christ. Right? And the more we see it for what it is, the more it becomes for us. And I'll talk more about this in a second. So anytime God conveys his grace to us, this is a mystery. Okay? Now we know there are 7 common mysteries or sacraments, right? You learned them in Sunday school: marriage, baptism, chrismation, unction, priesthood, Eucharist, confession, communion. I said communion. Huh? Marriage. I said marriage. That's the first one. That is a cross, right? So that's just an injection of grace, right? Just married people in the room, right? All right, so you all understand. All right, so these are the 7 common ones that we think about. But are there more than 7? Are there other ways in which God gives his grace to us? Many, right? Many. Let's look at some of these other ones. Monasticism. What about the blessing of water? When Abuna pours water and he throws it at people, what's happening? God's grace in a visible sign. How about the funeral service? Is that a mystery? Sure. The anointing or crowning of an emperor, which we don't do that much. Icons, where they anoint icons. Or the icon itself, right? When an icon does a miracle. Kids are here. I got to pay Tootie more. Where's Joe? She's not getting paid enough. The relics of saints. Charity, right? So even St. John Chrysostom says charity is a sacrament, right? Giving to the poor is a sacrament. The church is a sacrament. All of creation is a sacrament. Everyday experiences with sacraments, with God are sacraments. So the point is, it's okay, Joe, you're going to make it. So the point is, and Peter just dumped off his kid on Joe. Nice. It's like Joe's doing such a great job with Theodore that you're just going to, all right. Peter's looking at me like he's scrolling through how many things he could say right now. Just pull back. Good man. All right. What you just witnessed is a sacrament, Peter, not attacking me back. Okay. All right, so, I already talked about this, but the Orthodox Church prefers to use the word mystery instead of sacrament. We talked about this. Oh, man, that's small. All right, so how do we benefit from sacraments, and then we'll be done. We are not truly Christian if we treat sacraments as mechanical rituals, okay? And this is very important, and this is something we can easily fall into as Orthodox Christians, right? The mechanicalness of church, the mechanicalness of confession, communion, especially communion, right? It just becomes a routine. I haven't taken communion in 2 weeks, okay? What does that mean? Well, I haven't. What's happening? Why are you saying that? I feel guilty. Why do you feel guilty? Because I should. Why do you should? Because I should, right? It's mechanical. Sacraments are not, yes. Absolutely. So Mary's point is yes, that's not the effect I was talking about, right? Now someone can say, I miss that intimacy with Christ. I miss that prayer. I haven't been to a liturgy in so long, and I feel an intimacy with Christ. It's like I haven't seen a friend for a month, right? And I really just want to hang out and talk, right? And we see this, I just watched a 60 Minutes documentary on Mount Athos, and they're talking about the number of praises the monks do. It's like 8 hours of services a day, every day. And they asked the monks, don't you get tired of all of these services? She's right behind you. Don't you get tired of all these services? And you know what their answer was? It's like, we get to talk to God for 8 hours a day. It's beautiful. It's the best 8 hours of the day, right? It's a conversation with God. Look at their perspective, right? It's not like, oh, Tasbih is 3 hours long, and then a liturgy, and then it's nothing like that to them. It's nothing like that to them. You don't become a monk if you think that way, right? It's a conversation. It's a love relationship, right? So mysteries have to be that way. They can't be mechanical. If they're mechanical, sorry, they lose a lot, right? I'm going to go, St. Paul says, he who eats and drinks of the Lord's blood unworthily brings what? Condemnation upon himself, right? So I'm not even going to go like it's worth 0. It might even be worth negative. So sacraments are not magical contracts that work automatically. They are rather personal encounters with Christ in faith. I want to say that again. They are not magical contracts that work automatically. A sacrament a mystery is a personal encounter with Christ. That's what it is, right? It's our way to personally encounter Christ. If I take out the personally encounter with Christ part, then I'm just having some bread, I'm being anointed by some oil, I'm sitting in front of a priest, getting marital advice, right? Or dumping all my problems on him. Okay? If it's not a personal encounter with Christ, then something's missing. And then, so this is God's way of continuing his presence with us, right? This is God's way. Christ is not here with us, but he continues through the Holy Spirit, through the works of these sacraments. Okay? And this is extremely important, right? We have to find Christ in these mysteries. We have to find Christ in the sacraments. And this is how he continues his relationship with us. I mean, I even think about confession. I'll skip that. Okay. So this is a beautiful quote on communion by a guy named George Florsky. The climax of the sacrament is the presence of Christ, and in the personal encounter of the faithful with their living Lord. Preparation is precisely for one's meeting with Christ in the sacrament, personal and intimate. This personal encounter of believers with Christ is the very core of Orthodox devotional life. So I want you to think of that sentence, that statement, and compare it to our own experience of the liturgy, right? It's the experience with Christ is the culmination of the sacrament. If that's not there, then something's missing. Right? We need to be working towards that. Okay. I'll bring one point. Again, we're talking about sacraments not being magical or mechanical. You all remember the story of the woman who was having the blood flow? Another one's let out. Oh, Tootie just let out. So who's the other class? Oh, it's the first. Here they come. And that's all she wrote. Daddy, Mommy. Daddy. All right. If we sit still, they'll leave. They won't know we're here. Huh? I know. You guys have to tip your Sunday school teachers. Tip them. Chocolate, Starbucks cards. Rapunzel's a saint. Everyone knows that. Okay. All right. Let me make one last point. I know you're all sick of me talking, but let me make one last point. The sacraments are very much like the story of this woman. Does anyone remember this woman who touched the hem? Someone remind me of the story. The hem of his garment. She was in a crowd, right? Other than Mary, teacher's pet. Anyone else? Anyone remember the story? She's bleeding, and she wanted to be cured, and so she said, "I'll touch the hem of his garment." So she touched the hem of his garment. The bleeding stopped. Christ said, I felt some power from me leave. Who touched me? And what did Peter say back to him? Sahbak. He mocked Jesus. He said, what do you mean someone touched you? Everyone touched you. Okay? And this is Peter's style. Kind of rude. Right? This is Peter's style. He says these kind of like little digs, right? He says to him, everybody touched you. Like, really? And every time I think of this, I think of communion, right? And everyone comes and touches Christ. And only one person walks away with power that left Christ, right? So everyone's touching him. And you see this, right? Whenever the Pope comes into town, people like reach over the guards and like try to hit him and pull his beard and get a barakah. And it's nuts, right? What are they trying to do? Touch him. Okay? Well, we have Christ. Sorry, forget the Pope. We have Christ. Everyone's touching him. Everyone's eating him. And everyone's what? Getting nothing. Everyone's touching Christ. People are touching him all over the place. How many people were touching him for a blessing? I'm sure some. And what'd they get? Nothing. And then he's walking in this crowd for a while. Then all of a sudden he stops. Some power just left me. You mean what I mean? Can communion be like that? Can 30 people go and then one person get power? Yeah. Every Sunday. Every Sunday. People touch. People come, people commune, nothing. Right? So the mechanicalness of the sacraments creates this type of effect, right? When we approach it differently, we get more out of it. So I'll talk very quickly about efficacy and effectiveness. The efficacy of a sacrament, just to kind of be sacramental theologians here for a second. The efficacy of a sacrament comes from its institution, right? If an Orthodox priest or a canonized priest does the sacrament according to the rites of the church, it's real, right? So baptism is real. Communion is real if a priest does it. Now, whether or not it's actually effective for me is a totally different story, and that's sort of like what we just talked about. All right, we're done. Oh, Joe just left his kid. Did he make noise? Yeah. It's great. I'm like stressed, and Joe's like gone. Okay. Any other questions? I'll just stop. It's all right. Just bring him in and have him run around. No big deal. Okay. Any other questions? This one's back. All right. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Let's stand up and pray. Make us so worthy to say with all thanksgiving.